Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today, we're busting one of the most stubborn myths in American history, and it's all about something surprisingly dental. Most of us grew up hearing that George Washington had wooden teeth. It's in jokes, cartoons, even some school stories. It's simple, memorable, and completely wrong. Washington's teeth were not made of wood. The real story is stranger, more human, and honestly, way more revealing about the 1700s than any legend ever could be. So, let's start with why this myth is so sticky. What feels believable because it fits the general vibe people have of early America: rough tools, frontier life, everything handmade, and kind of primitive. Wooden teeth becomes the perfect symbol. It turns Washington into a folk hero, not a real person, a tough old leader chewing on history with a mouthful of oak. But the truth is, Washington's dental problems were serious, constant, and a very public struggle for him. His dentures were built from the absolute best materials and methods the 18th century could offer, not because dentistry was amazing back then, but because he had the money, status, and access to skilled craftsmen. So what were they actually made of? Washington's dentures used a wild mix of materials that sound like they belong in a museum display case, not a punchline. Depending on the set and the time, they could involve carved hippopotamus ivory, gold wire, brass screws, and yes, even real human teeth. This isn't a horror story, but a weird reality of old medicine and old markets. See, dentures back then weren't simple plastic molds. They were engineered objects, complicated devices. Think of them like a fancy, custom-built pocket watch for your mouth. Now, this is where the story shifts from myth to a much more interesting reality. The wooden teeth legend survives because people imagine Washington just popping in some carved block and smiling like a cartoon, but real 18th century dentures were heavy, awkward, and often painful. They didn't fit perfectly. They rubbed the gums raw. They could change the shape of his face, and they made speaking difficult. They could even affect how he looked in portraits. And Washington cared a lot about how he appeared, not out of vanity, but because leadership in that era was partly visual. Presidents didn't have social media or microphones. Public presence was everything, and he understood that the image of stability was part of the job. So where did the wooden teeth idea even come from? One strong theory is that the ivory used in his dentures would stain over time. After years of wear and tear from things like wine, they would develop cracks and discolor to a brownish, grainy texture which, to a casual observer, might look a lot like wood. Wood is just a much catchier explanation. But the real story is better because it shows Washington as a human. He didn't have perfect health. He didn't glide through history like a marble statue. He dealt with constant discomfort, embarrassment, and the limits of his era's medicine, all while doing a job that demanded calm, control, and constant public attention. And there's another twist people often miss. Washington's dental struggles likely shaped his public behavior. If your dentures hurt, you might speak less. You might avoid big smiles. You might hold your face more rigidly. So when you look at those famous portraits of Washington, that tight-lipped seriousness isn't just founding father intensity. Sometimes, it is also just what it looks like when you're trying to stay composed while your mouth is really uncomfortable. That's the kind of detail that makes the past feel real. So here's the big takeaway. The myth says Washington had wooden teeth, and that turns him into a simple legend. The reality is that his dentures were high-tech for-the-time devices, built from multiple materials. And they tell a story about medicine, wealth, and the very human price of maintaining a public image. The wooden teeth story makes it sound like he had the cheapest solution. The truth is the opposite. He had the most advanced dental technology money could buy. Washington didn't have wooden teeth. He had 18th century problems and 18th century solutions. And that is way more interesting than wood. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed uncovering this piece of history, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more myth busting. See you next time.